I'll just get fired right into Branded to Kill then, which, as kind of mentioned, started life as another B-movie for the Nikatsu company, but the suits weren't all that enamored with the script, so they gave their go-to director Suzuki free rein to do whatever he wanted to, and seemingly what he wanted to do was melt the brain of anyone wandering into a cinema expecting a film that had any sort of conventionality to it. I say this in the way of preamble to excuse any recap not making a lot of sense, as, well, it doesn't. Joe Shishido's Goro Hanada is the number 3 ranked hitman in Japan, that apparently being a thing, and in a roundabout way agrees to help a friend with a job that turns out to be disposing of a body for the Yakuza that turns, for no readily explicable reason, into a running series of firefights with other gangsters, including at least one other highly ranked hitman. For all the chaos, the main plot driver coming from this sequence is entirely unrelatedly Hanada's car breaking down, leading to him being picked up by an exceedingly strange femme fatale, Anamari's Misako Nakajo, a woman with a death wish, and is as into dead butterflies and birds as much as Hanada is into the smell of boiling rice, which is to say, worryingly obsessively. She offers him an almost impossible to execute multi-target contract that, against all odds, and in some instances the laws of physics, seems to be going well until a freak accident sees Hanada kill a bystander, which is apparently a big no-no in the ranked murder league, meaning that there's now a target on his head that the legendary number 1 killer, played by Koji Nbara, is coming to collect. It's up to Hanada to survive, and perhaps defeat the odds, and claim the number 1 position for himself. Now, when you say it like that, it's more or less coherent, which I do apologise for, as that's entirely misleading. This film is bonkers, likes of which I've not seen since Operation Kid Brother. I've carefully left out the parts where, for example, Hanada makes an escape by randomly jumping out of the window to land on a passing hot air balloon, or the multiple times items of jewellery prove to be life-saving bullet deflection devices, or indeed the entire final act where, in order to mess with Hanada, his new mortal enemy simply moves into his apartment and lives with him for a while. It is bananas. Now, the weird thing for me, and apologies for the opinion spoilers, is that despite Pistol Opera doing much the same stick, I actually really enjoyed Branded to Kill in a way that I most certainly did not for Pistol Opera. I don't know if that's the kind of charming jankiness that comes from this low-budget Origins, or if it's the hypnotic qualities of Shihido's cosmetically enhanced cheeks, making him look like a psychotic hamster, or if it's the film's dedication to zagging where every bone in your body expects it to zig. It's a 100% certifiable, absurd, perhaps parodic nonsense, of course, and there's more than a few elements of this that ordinarily would just be straight up gratuitous, particularly everything involving Hanada's clothing-averse wife that's maybe only not entirely indefensible as pornography because Hanada's often huffing boiling rice at the same time, giving these scenes a veneer of implausible deniability. I'm certainly not going to call Branded to Kill good in any way, but I can tell you that I laughed like a drain, a plumbing item renowned for laughing heartily and frequently throughout this film. Am I laughing with it or at it? There's a question, but perhaps the answer is not important as the laughter itself. I'm definitely laughing at it. It's ridiculous. Drew, you have a different opinion from this, I gather.
Yes, I really didn't care for this film at all, which is annoying. I wasn't aware of the film or the director at all until you mentioned doing this, Scott. That may be a feeling on my part if it's as influential as everything I've read suggests. But
it's certainly a hard sell. I don't know if this was a good entry point to his works. I might like to have had a bit more context before going into this, because this is just nuts.
Oh, it does. I was sold by the poster. The poster's really stylish and it looks like a really kind of classic 1960s film. It's like clearly Bond influenced. And I thought, okay, yeah, Japanese take on Bond. That's what I was expecting. I deliberately read nothing else about the film. I was like, look at the poster. And then this is a film I got. Okay. It's like, and I didn't, quite early on, I was already wondering what to expect from this film or what this film is going to be, because the former hitman that he does a favour for, who's helping him transport the businessman across the country, starts acting in the most amateurish way possible, like sort of jumping about like a monkey.
Yeah.
At one point when the firefight starts, when they get ambushed, and is this bad acting? Is it deliberate? What's going on? And there's no way to tell.
Yeah.
And then it only gets weirder from there. The very fact, his first job is to transport a businessman across Japan who's being targeted for something. That's the setup. And then that businessman turns out later to be the number 1 killer. Why? Yeah. It was my main feeling to this.
It's not that well explained, but to be honest, by the time you get to the end, it's probably the least important question that is raised in the whole thing.
Nothing's explained. And like, I watched some of the interviews that are on the Criterion Collection release, and clearly the director didn't know what was happening. Some of it too, didn't care.
Yeah.
It's willfully incomprehensible. But things like butterflies, massively significant part of this. And what did the director have to say about butterflies? They were in the script, so I kept them. What did they mean? Ask Yozo Takawa. Or Tawaka, sorry. Right? That's good. I'm glad you care so much about your film. You have no idea why you're putting anything in.
Yeah. There's a line in the Wikipedia article, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it's saying that in directing as actors, Suzuki let them play the roles as they saw fit and only intervened when they went off track, which suggests that there was ever a track to begin with, which I do not believe for a second.
Yeah. He does say something like that in one of those interviews too.
Yes. I let everyone overact as much as they wanted because everyone's chewing the scenery at all points in this film. It's ridiculous.
What he said was actually it was Joe Shishido was basically the only person who was improvised. He was telling everybody else to do it, but they all wanted to be directed, and only Joe Shishido would improvise. And saying because they thought that a director's role was to direct. Like, is it not?
Yeah.
I kind of thought that's what they were to do, but
yes,
but no.
It's kind of in the job title, isn't it?
Yeah. And he's saying some of, I think, quite telling things like, my films could be edited one day. I didn't spend too long editing the film. Yeah, I can definitely tell. And I know actually the schedule that studio had was 104 films a year. They released a double bill every week. They had, I think it's 10 days pre-production, 25 days shooting, 3 days post-production. That's for everything, including dubbing and editing. So there's not a lot of time. But in these interviews, Suzuki's talking about that from another Japanese studio, I'm afraid I forget the name, that had influenced him. And they were saying, like, you only shoot what you're going to need. Like, but how do you need it? That's the point of good editing. You find in the edit that you need something else. So maybe you should have shot it. Like, you don't always know while you're shooting it whether you're going to need something or not. You find whereas like he didn't seem to care. It's like it's edited in a day and already had an idea of what to do. Like, okay, it's weird too. And also the fact that it's not thought out at all is really clear. And for instance, first of all, the creepy rice thing, which has probably ruined rice for me forever in a way that our dear friend Craig once ruined After 8 Minutes for me. This kind of weird rice pervert, you think it's some sort of really important thing. And in fact, in one of these interviews, Seijun Suzuki said that it was thought, this is a really good way to show this is a Japanese killer. So that basically it gets a hard on from the smell of rice and not from a T-bone steak. But later on in the same interview, he said that actually the only reason the rice is there at all is they didn't have enough money to make the film, so solicited product placement. One of the companies that wanted product placement was a rice cooker maker, and that's why it's in there.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were delighted by this placement in this film.
But then apparently also it was the director's idea to make the rice an aphrodisiac, as apparently the hitman wouldn't want to go to bed with his wife. What? It's maybe to give you an idea of how I came to this, how I felt by this film by the end though. I'm watching it and there were some really interestingly composed shots. The monochrome photography is striking in places.
Yeah.
Except that I'm watching this and I'm thinking, in another film, like for example, Scott, there's a scene, oh God, I have no idea where it is because I have no idea like the timeline of this film at all. But you have shots like there's like kind of quick movement past patterned concrete, which kind of almost has that kind of hypnotic, almost like moirish pattern to it in the film. And then there's a scene where he's in a tunnel, standing next to this big grey concrete wall.
Yeah.
In another film that I liked, I would have looked at that and thought, I'm quite impressed how they've taken such a dull bit of concrete and given it such high contrast and made it look really interesting. Whereas in this film, I'm watching that scene thinking, if this was in colour, that would be the ugliest, dullest place you've ever been.
Yeah.
So like that was the direction I was seeing things from this film. I just was not enjoying it because I didn't care about anything that was happening or why it was happening. I did laugh a couple of points, possibly in spite of myself, I must admit, when he's at one point you're seen as a montage of him actually doing his job of being a killer for hire, and he's shooting people through the drain pipe to the sink in their office.
Yes, a particular high point for me, that.
But then at one point he's saved from death by being shot in the belt buckle, and I swore.
Yes, there's lots of very silly things in this film. It's something so silly it's repeated. At least it might be repeated once again with another belt buckle, but it's definitely done by a headband at one point. So yes, it's just daft.
I don't. It's striking looking, but this film just didn't do anything for me. It's kind of frustrating because there were bits of that I wanted to like more, and I don't. Well, as much as last night I was cursing you, having watched these two films together, like even suggesting them. If I'm honest, I don't regret having watched this one at least, because it's different. I've not seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And hope never to see anything like it again. But I have seen it now. It's different and interesting. Honestly, I'm not quite sure why it's so influential, because it's obscure for the sake of being obscure.
Yeah. I probably got a bit more about it because I've been looking to get back into watching a few more Takashi Miike films, and there's strong elements of this that seems to pop up in a lot of Miike's work, particularly all his Dead or Alive series is clearly inspired by this. It's got more or less the same tropes of weird nonsense happening to charismatic people, and that's essentially the plot of this. But obviously, I got a bit more joy out of it to you, but yeah.
I was talking about, I didn't understand why it's so influential, and there are, as is so often the case, lots of people saying, reading different things, and I guess that's a part of art. You bring your own interpretation to it.
Yeah. But
there's like lots of suggestions. It's like it's a satire. I'm not quite sure what it's a satire of, to be honest. But as much as he was fed up of doing bog standard Yakuza films, that's more reactionary than satirical. But you could read into themes of, like, I guess it's something similar to the Japanese version of the Hays Code that allowed you to only have nudity in certain. There's a lot of nudity in this film, but only in certain ways. And you couldn't have like hips moving and things, and lower half of the body had to be obscured in certain scenes. And a lot of people saying it's like he's playing with that and he's kind of making fun of that, and it almost feels like that. I could have bought that having not heard him interviewed.
Yes,
because there are scenes where it's like kind of particularly that's slightly different from how the censorship in this film works, which is that you can't even if you're not seeing anything, like you can't have like two people's hips in close proximity and moving, because apparently that would suggest they're having sex, and that's bad. But I think it's quite well known that genitals are considered obscene in Japanese media for reasons, and in Japanese pornography they're pixelated, I think, and so in this they're completely obscured. And the way like it's kind of gets so close to showing stuff, but then like a shadow will move or a bit of clothing will fall. It feels very deliberate.
Yeah,
I feel like it's like taking things deliberately right up to the edge, and it feels like that. Except that in these interviews, in the Criterion Collection edition, again, he says that no, basically all my compositions were in my head beforehand. That's happenstance. So either he's lying, and I don't know why you do that, or people are reading way more into this than it's actually there, which is quite common. So yeah, so I like watch this thinking there are maybe some like themes in here, but having seen things like that, heard things like that, like maybe there isn't actually all that much in there.
Yeah. I guess we'll move on to his sort of very loose sequel, Pistol Opera, which, as I mentioned, while it's doing broadly the same things, I just did not get in with it at all.